Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host. My guest today is Scott MacKillop. Scott is another friend of a friend. He and I have never really met before this, but yet again, I walk away from the conversation feeling like we're cut from the same cloth, like we're just part of the same tribe. And I absolutely was thrilled to have this conversation with him. Scott and I both come from finance and asset management and financial planning background, and we really talk about none of that in this conversation. Scott is an avid outdoorsman that he developed over his entire life. Not something that his parents instilled into him, but he's very clear about what his parents did gift him with, and it's really fascinating. One of the things that I took away from the conversation is he points out how, for him, fear, especially in the outdoors, clarifies his mind and it doesn't cloud it. And then he uses that clarity in a lot of different ways. His pursuits and pushing himself outdoors has given him the confidence and the strength to push himself and take risks in the boardroom. He's got an extensive career with many different companies, innovating things that were created that didn't used to exist. And that confidence then feeds back to him on the mountain doing harder and harder things. We bring it full circle by the end in talking about what he's looking forward to. And at his age of 72, what's there next to do? And what happens when he can't do the things that he has fallen in love with and has pursued over and over again? And that's a question all of us have to answer, just at different points of our life. And Scott does a great job of tying that together. I think you're going to love the fact that he points out that adventure for him is both about self-discovery, but more importantly, it's about feeling fully alive. It's feeling all of the emotions, good, bad, ugly. All of those things happen when he pushes himself to a limit of exhaustion, confusion at times, uncertainty, and from that, he gets the experience of feeling fully alive. And I think that is a wonderful takeaway from his pursuit of adventure. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Scott MacKillop. All right, Scott MacKillop, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. And, as I let you know before, I'm still new at this whole game, and I'm in the 20s for episode count at this point. And I really have enjoyed every one of these. You and I both come from the finance background, and having an outlet to talk about something other than money
Right. Yeah.
has been good. And to talk about things like adventure and how people do that and what they get out of it has been really unique and special for me. So our mutual friend, Steve Sandusky, introduced us, and I've been looking forward to this conversation with the little bit that I do know about you and your background. And so I appreciate your time and look forward to where this goes.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. I mean, it's a topic I love to talk about, and I'm eager to dive in with you. So,
Well, good. Let's start from, basic stuff. Tell folks who you are, a little bit about you, and where you're at today.
sure. Well, I'll try to telescope that story down to a manageable length. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area back in the 50s and 60s. 60s was a pretty interesting time to be back in that area.
I would say so.
Yeah. And then I went to college there in that area. That was Silicon Valley before it was called Silicon Valley. So that's a long time ago. And then I moved out to Washington, D.C., went to law school there, practiced law in Washington, D.C. for about 15 years, and then got into the asset management business. So I've been in the asset management business for 30-something years now, working at, I guess I've been the president or CEO of 5 different TAMPs.
Wow.
And so I have a lot of experience working with financial advisors. And in that capacity, the last firm that I started with some colleagues was called First Ascent Asset Management. That firm was purchased about a year ago by GeoWealth, which is a much larger technology-based TAMP. And so now I'm part of that organization, and strategic advisor is my title there. So I'm advising on strategic matters, and so that's kind of a really short synopsis of my path. But of course, there are lots of branches, to that story. I'm a guitar player and mountain
wow.
climber and all kinds of things that I enjoy doing outside of the finance area. So lots to talk about there.
Yeah, that's several interesting outlets that don't really have a whole lot to do with money or money management. So
Yeah.
let's growing up in the Bay Area, I'm always curious how what growing up was like, and
Yeah.
when did this adventure bug get planted? You know, was
Yeah.
it something, some of my guests I've talked to, they describe basically being like a feral animal as a
Yeah.
kid, you know,
Yeah.
running wild. And then
Yeah.
other folks have had a pretty subdued childhood and got into the outdoors and adventure later in life. So where
Yeah.
do you fit in that spectrum?
Yeah, so growing up in the Bay Area, as I said, in the 60s was a really interesting time. It was, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, which is where I lived, is a relatively affluent area. So I was very privileged in, as I look back on my childhood, I didn't have a lot of challenges, things, were pretty good. I had a great mom and a great dad and lots of friends, and, we got to wander around, and it was a pretty safe place. And so not too many restrictions put on us. So we got to wander the world, and there was a lot of music going on there. Jerry
Mhm.
Garcia was actually my guitar teacher for a little while from the
What?
Grateful Dead.
Are you
Yeah.
serious?
Now he was a local guitar teacher, and I signed up. I actually wanted to sign up with a different guy named Troy Wiedenheimer, but he wasn't available. So they said, well, we got this other guy. And so I ended up taking guitar lessons from him. But, Janis Joplin and Big Brother, they played at our high school, and Jefferson Airplane, played at a hotel opening, and Santana and Creedence Clearwater were playing free concerts in the area. So it was it was a really wild time on the music
That
side
is
of things. So
amazing.
yeah, it got me very inspired in that area. And as I said, I still play with a band and so forth. But the adventure thing really started when I was in high school, because my dad was not an outdoor guy. He was, I loved my dad, great role model, but don't ask him to, put on hiking boots and a backpack. That was not his thing. So I had a friend though in high school who was a burro boy for a pack trip that went through the Sierras throughout the summer. And he encouraged me to come along, participate in one of the hikes that they were doing. They'd go out for about 10 days, use the burros as the pack animals to carry the lion's share of the equipment. And
So
then,
for us East Coasters,
yeah.
what is a burro?
So a burro is a donkey, it's
Okay.
the same thing. And I think we had 5 of them on the trip, and they have these kind of wooden boxes that hang off their sides. And my friend was responsible for taking care of them as the burro boy. And I did participate in the first hike and just loved it. I thought it was just amazing. And the group that ran the trips asked me if I wanted to be a burro boy. And so I said, sure. And so for the rest of the summer, I just spent as a burro boy with my friend taking care of the animals and hiking through the Sierras. So we probably were 2 months just hiking around
Wow.
back there. And so that's what really got me started.
What was it
And
about that experience that really clicked with you?
it was the beauty of it and the freedom of being out there on your own. I was probably, I don't know, 15 or something like that, maybe.
Oh yeah.
And just seeing things I'd never seen before, having responsibilities that I'd never had. I'm responsible, for these 5 animals, and making sure that, that they would occasionally, they were all roped together, but occasionally though, one of them would fall and kind of go off the edge of the trail. And our job was to, go down underneath them and unpack the boxes and push them back up onto the trail and so forth. So there's just a lot of things you learned and saw that you would never learn or see any other place. And the camaraderie out on the trail was great. This is one of the things that continues to be a draw for me, is just when you go out with a group of people, it's just a wonderful way to bring people together. And regardless of who they are, what their backgrounds are, you're all out there kind of equal on the trail. And so it was just a magnificent opportunity to get out and enjoy nature. And of course, there's kind of I didn't think about it at the time when I was 15 or whatever I was, but there's a sort of a soul nurturing aspect to that, just being out in this beauty. And, that's just continued to inspire me to this day.
Well, that seems very fortuitous, to have I'm not sure where your mom fits on this, but it sounds like your dad was an avid indoorsman, and
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
and to find yourself outdoors and loving it, right place, right time.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. Well, my mom was a little bit more of an outdoors person. She liked to garden in the backyard, but that was about
okay,
as far as she
that
went.
was
Neither one of them owned a tent. Let's put it that way.
okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But then,
So
yeah, then it was later. Really when I got to Colorado, which was kind of later in my career, there was kind of a gap there. Between being a burro boy at a young age and then when I really got serious about hiking and climbing mountains and so forth.
so
And that
it
that
was
happened
really
later.
a seed being planted then,
Yeah,
and it had
absolutely.
to grow and be watered and sit on for a little while. So how old were you when you ended up in Colorado and really starting into some of these more serious things?
Yeah, so I was more in my 40s then.
Okay.
By the
That's a
time I
big,
got,
a
yeah,
fairly
pretty
big
big
gap.
gap. It wasn't that I didn't do any hiking in between. It was just that it didn't occupy as much of my life or as much of my focus as it does today. Today a week doesn't go by where I don't take a hike somewhere. And so it wasn't until I got out here because I was on the East Coast and Washington D.C. If you're familiar with it, there are you can go out into Virginia and find some good hiking out there, or
Yeah.
Maryland, and I did some of that, but it's a lot harder. I mean, right now I'm looking out my window and at the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, and so I can be in 10 minutes. I can be hiking up them.
Yeah. Now you're just trying to make me jealous. That's not very nice.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Colorado is absolutely one of my favorite places in the world, and I look for any excuse to be out there for any reason. So
Yeah.
that it would be a dream to have a house that overlooks the Rockies and easy access to it, and all of the playground that it is to do
Yeah.
whatever you want to. And
Yeah. Now you sort of take it for granted when you live here, but it's been a blessing.
yeah, I've got a couple buddies that live down near Castle Rock in a town called Sedalia.
Yeah.
And they're real life cowboys. They live around horses, and everything they do is around horses. But the pictures they send and the times that I've visited them out there, again, being an East Coaster, the scale of the size of everything is pretty amazing. And for me, that's part of the love of being outdoors, is that sense of awe in the bigness of things and the smallness of me. In comparison to that, folks listening to this won't be able to see you shaking your head, but it looks like you resonate with that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you realize when you get out there, and especially before the advent of all trails, now that we have these apps that help us stay on the trail, there were a lot of hikes I took where I wasn't sure where I was and which way to go. And you start to appreciate how big and how vast and how really unforgiving the outdoors can be if you're not tuned into what you're doing out there.
Yeah, I want to get into that because I know you've got a story or two about the unforgivingness of nature. So in your 20s and 30s, you were living in DC. Was it really just, were you way deep in the hustle and just getting settled into a profession, or was it just a lack of access to some of these outdoors things?
Yeah, I guess my focus was at that time, it was more on running. I had a friend who was a big runner and he kind of got me involved in it. So I ran, marathons and I don't know how 100 something, races, 10Ks and so forth, and did triathlons and all that sort of thing. So I was more focused on that kind of activity. And probably part of that was just availability. It was just, the running paths and so forth along the Potomac were really easy for me to access, but finding a mountain meant I had to go, drive pretty far away and plan. So it was just really more of who I was hanging out with at the time and what we were into.
Yeah. So what took you from DC to Colorado?
So there was a step in between. So that I worked for, as I was practicing law in DC, and I was a securities lawyer, and one of my clients was down in Atlanta. and they asked me to come to work for them down there. So that's when I got into the asset management business.
I see.
And then the firm that was down there in Atlanta, which was was actually the first mutual fund TAMP. We were inventing TAMPs without knowing that, there was no such term back then. Yeah. So we created the first mutual fund based TAMP. And then that firm was acquired by another firm, which is out here in Denver. It was called Portfolio Management Consultants, or PMC at the time. It's now part of the InvestNet organization.
Okay.
So I came
Seems
out
like a lot of things are part of the InvestNet organization these
yeah,
days.
just about everything sometimes it looks like.
Yeah.
But so that's what got me out here. That was a wonderful thing to be acquired by a firm in Denver and asked to move out here, because I had come out here to ski a lot, especially with my kids and so forth. And so I was very eager to get out here.
How many kids do you have?
I have three. Yeah.
3.
And I actually work with one of them. My middle son is partner of mine at a firm that I'm at. So I've worked with him actually at 2 different firms. So we're longtime colleagues.
So, and where in Atlanta did you live? Was it closer to downtown?
Yeah, I lived in Marietta, so just a little bit outside.
Oh, okay. I think we maybe discussed this because I was in Marietta, I think around the same time that you were there.
That's
in the
right.
mid-90s.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
So good time to be in and around Atlanta.
I had a great time there.
Braves and
yeah, absolutely. World Series, got to see the World Series and so forth. Yeah, that was fun.
Have you become a Rockies fan since being in Denver?
I love the Rockies, but I sort of love the Rockies like I love an old sad dog. That it's just like they're never gonna really do much, but I love to go out to the ballpark and I still find that to be an exhilarating experience, and I love to watch baseball. But I don't pin my hopes on the Rockies doing anything.
Yeah, the Rockies are really good at having good talent that they trade away somewhere else.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah,
they're excellent at that.
Yeah, every year I have hopes for the Broncos, which are almost always disappointing. But the Rockies, I've given up, expecting anything. So I love the entertainment value of going to the ball game, but I don't expect any time in the playoffs. Yeah.
It is one of the great venues to watch a baseball game, though.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
It's hard to beat that.
Yep, for sure.
Well, good. So what I'm getting at is kind of where you started getting into challenging things. So even though there was this gap with the outdoors, you were still pushing yourself. I mean, hundreds of 10Ks and marathons and triathlons, that ain't easy, right? And I'm sure it was partly to stay in shape and feel good, but I think that goal falls to the wayside if that's the only reason that you're doing it. So
absolutely.
What got you into doing that and sticking with those kind of things?
Yeah. Well, there's a very common theme between all the running and the triathlons and marathons and all that, and the mountain experiences. And that is just trying to see what you can do, push yourself and see what your limits are and do things that you could never have expected you would be able to do. I remember the first time I still remember the conversation. I can remember exactly where I was when a friend of mine brought a friend of his into my apartment, and he was talking, this friend of his was talking about his experience in running a marathon. And I thought, I could never do that. I could never run 26 miles. But then you start to think about what the possibilities are, and you start to imagine yourself doing that, and you start to toy with the idea of, could I actually run that far, or could I actually climb that high, or could I actually, find my way through this wilderness? And you just want to test yourself. And I think that's really what it is. It's an urge to get outside of your comfort zone and see what you can do.
Where do you think that came from, though? Is that something?
I just think it's just in me.
It's just in you.
Yeah, I think as I've thought back on it, I think there is going back to my childhood, as I, described briefly, I think I had a really good childhood, a really solid childhood. I was blessed in so many ways. I had so many things going for me. But one of the main things I had was I had 2 parents who were just encouraged me to try things and do things, and they gave me a lot of self-confidence, I guess. And so it was just a sense that I could do things, that I I had capabilities that I only needed to explore and tap into, and that I could do really whatever I set my mind to. And it's kind of a trite thing, but if your parents tell you that and you go out and you actually try that, whether that's being a burrow boy or whatever it may be, and things turn out well, it gives you this urge to go try it again. It just becomes a rewarding experience, and then you have the accomplishment once you do the thing that makes you feel good. It's like I'm proud of the times I got in my marathons, and I'm proud of what I did in the triathlons, and I'm proud of the mountains I've climbed. It feels good to have done those things, and so yeah, it's very rewarding.
I think that is such a cool highlight to talk about your childhood and your parents and the solid foundation that they allowed you to go out and try these things. And it sounds like failure really wasn't a bad word. Like go out, and if it didn't work, come back. You're still safe here. Go out and try something else, and create a lot of resilience and strength in your understanding what you could accomplish.
Yeah.
And that also, as a dad that's now I've got several teenagers. I'm in those final years of trying to launch them. It just highlights parenting ain't for the faint of heart. Like there's a lot riding on it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the message about failure is really important. So I was very clear about that when I was raising my kids. I said, failure got a negative connotation in the world today, but don't think about it that way. Failure is just an experience you had that didn't turn out the way you hoped it would, but it's still experience. You're going to learn as much from those experiences. You're not going to disappear in a cloud of smoke. You're still going to be here. You're going to carry that experience with you, and it's going to be just as valuable as the successes that you have. So don't worry about that.
Did they believe you?
Yeah, no, I think they did. I think they did. I think all three of them have been very bold in their moves and in what they've done in their lives so far. And I think they have that same confidence that I think I was talking about a minute ago, where they think they can go out and do things and life will be okay and things will work out, and somehow they will survive and ride again. So
do you recall as a kid or even into your 20s, one of those experiences where it was a really a giant challenge that seemed insurmountable that you succeeded in and that you can look back on?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge I had, on the adventure front came a little bit later than that. It came, I think I was in my 30s at the time.
Okay.
This was when I lived in Atlanta, but I went out to Colorado by myself to really I went to a monastery actually that's out in the desert in southern Colorado. And they have this program there where you can go down for a week and live in a little cabin. They call it hermitage, and live on your own for a week. And I just felt like I needed to spend some quiet time. It was a week where nobody's allowed to talk, and everybody, there's a common eating place, and you go and you eat together, but you don't have any conversation. And so it was just a time to kind of get clear headed and just be out there in the high desert country and be on your own and think about things. So I decided to climb a 14, or what we call a 14er out here in Colorado, which is a mountain that's over 14,000 feet tall. And I'd done that before on my burrow boy experience. I climbed Mount Whitney twice actually during that summer. And so I'd climbed 14ers before, but I didn't have a lot of experience doing it. So I went, I guess I got on the trail probably 7 o'clock in the morning, and I thought I'd be back down by 3 in the afternoon by my calculations. But that was a horrible miscalculation. And I ended up climbing up this 14er. I actually tied in with 2 other guys who seemed to be pretty knowledgeable hikers, and we got up to the top of the 14er. But then a thunderstorm came in and the weather turned bad. It was a pretty nasty environment. We scrambled down the mountain, but those 2 guys were camping out in a tent that was just at the base of the 14er. But I still had about 7 or 8 miles to go to get out to where my car was parked. So the sun was going down and the rain was falling, and I had at that point run out of food and run out of water. and was trying to get back down to my car. And there were a couple of places in the trail that I noticed coming up where avalanches had kind of wiped out the trail. There was just scree and debris on the trail. So in the daylight, you could see where the trail picked up again, 50 or 60 yards ahead of you. But in the darkness where I was coming down, I couldn't tell.
So you had really miscalculated timing if you
badly.
No headlamp or anything.
Think about it. Bad equipment. I had a jacket, but it wasn't totally waterproof. I didn't have enough food, didn't have enough water. I had grabbed a flashlight that they had in that hermitage when I left, but I hadn't tested it. So it turned out it didn't work very well. You had to hold it at a certain angle to get it to work. And the batteries were pretty much dead. They died, at some point along the way. And so I was literally out on the side of a mountain in the middle of the night in pouring rain with no food, no water.
Yeah.
And I was wandering around trying to find the trail. And I remembered those signs I'd seen coming up warning about bears and all of that. And I'm thinking, I might die out here. I really might die because I mean, if you think about it, you're out in the wilderness and the the rain's coming down. That means there's no moonlight, there's no starlight, there's nothing. I mean, it is pitch black. So I'm walking along just trying not to fall off a cliff and tripping on logs and rocks and all kinds of things. And I'm all muddy and trying to find my way down. I was exhausted, and at about 11 o'clock, I decided to crawl into a hollow log that I found just to get out of the rain and maybe rest for a while and wait until daylight. But I laid down and immediately just started shivering, and I could tell I wasn't going to make it through the night if I didn't keep moving. So I got out of the log, and I walked about 15 feet and found the trail. It was right up the hill from the log. And from that point on, I could sort of find my way down just by feeling the trail with my feet. I fell off a couple of times, but I made it down. About 3 a.m. I literally bumped into my car down at the trailhead. I couldn't see it; it was so dark, but I bumped into it. And
oh my goodness!
Yeah.
So
went back to the hermitage and cleaned myself up.
Yeah, and so in the middle of that, I guess it would be one of those things where the only way to get there is through, right? I mean, you can't go, oh, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
There's no punching out. It's not a Walt Disney ride. You're really out there. I mean, that was a thing I've never forgotten. And some people I think that I hike with sometimes, I wonder if they actually appreciate that. You're not, there is no, I'm done button. There is no punching out. You have to finish. And there's nobody who's going to come and get you or carry your pack for you or make up for the mistakes you make along the way if you're not prepared. Like, that particular time I wasn't prepared. I learned a lot from that experience about preparation, about planning, just about whatever your expectations are, just keep an open mind, that you may not get back at 3 p.m. like you think. You may be out there at night. So people ask me sometimes, why do you have a headlamp in your backpack when we're just taking an afternoon hike? And I can tell them the long sad story, but there's a lot of equipment that I carry around with me now that most people probably don't. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would imagine fear, like those final hours of hiking through the dark, fear was at an 11.
Yeah.
Did you find it clouding your judgment, or was it like sharper focus?
I found it clarified things quite a bit.
Clarified.
Yeah. It was like this, the reality of it set in at some point is like, you are the only thing that's going to save you at this point. There's really nothing else. I mean, hopefully God's smiling on you, but he's not going to carry you back to the trailhead either. You're going to have to do this.
Yeah.
And so I got real clear about what I was doing, every step, stopping, thinking, am I panicking here? Am I making good decisions? And just getting extremely clear about my situation. So that's what I found happened to me. I don't know, I think other people probably have different reactions in that situation, but I really thought this, this is 50-50 whether I'm going to get out of here.
Was that the most tenuous situation you had ever been in up to that point in your life?
Yeah, I think that for sure. That was the closest to really facing death and the reality of maybe having gotten in way over your head. Yeah. I mean, I've had other experiences that were close, but that was probably the worst. Yeah.
You've gone back, right?
Yeah.
If that was one of your first forays into the outdoors, you've gone back. And so what are some of the other, like, as you think of some of the bigger trips or bigger adventures that you've done?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that pop up to the top of that list?
Yeah. Well, so climbing Mount Kilimanjaro was a really big adventure. So that was an eye-opening experience, just being in Africa. You can see my wall hanging. Well, you can see it. I guess the listeners won't be able to see it.
It's very cool.
But that I got when I was in Africa. Yeah, seeing Africa and being in Africa and sort of seeing a world that's so different and experiencing a world that's just so different. But the adventure of climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro itself was great. I mean, it's not the hardest climb in the world, but it is pretty high. It's 19,000 something feet. So there's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of training ahead of time that goes into being able to do that. There's a lot of just acclimatization when you get there to be able to go that high. And you could see along the way people that would hit their wall, wherever that was. Some people are not meant to go to 19,000 feet, and they may be absolutely fantastic shape and great athletes, but altitude is a variable that's just almost independent of the shape that you're in. And some people do well at higher altitudes and some people don't. And, I've seen that over and over again, but certainly.
Do you think you can train for that? Like,
I think there's a certain amount of training you can do for that, but I think there's also just everybody has their ceiling,
Yeah.
I don't know where that is for most people. I'm not sure I could do, as I've gotten older now, I'm not sure I could go back and climb to 19,000 feet. I've climbed about 40 mountains over 14,000 feet now, and the ones I climbed when I was younger were easier than the ones I've climbed more recently, So I think my oxygen uptake, if you will, is probably getting a little lower. And, I just think, there's a physical limit that you have, and everybody's calibrated a little differently. So.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point that is also a challenge with any adventure, is not always just the adventure or itself, whatever it might be, but knowing what you're capable of. Yeah. So there's this distinction between, the reality of what you can do, at your age and stage or my age and stage. I can't fly to the moon. Right. So it would be very dangerous for me to try to do that.
Yeah.
But there are things that may seem a bit out of reach that we can still push through a preconceived limit to get to the other side. So how do you make that distinction? Yeah.
So it's an excellent point, because the focus is often on the physical capabilities of the person, right? It's on how good a shape you're in and how much training you did and so forth. But in my, rough calculation, half of climbing mountains or doing adventures is mental. It's what's going on inside of your head while you're doing it. And so your body is in as good a shape as it's in, but it's what's happening in your mind that gets you through. And so this is where I think experience has helped. Having climbed lots of mountains, and there's always a point, almost 100% of the time, especially when you're going to altitude, where you go, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? This is really, really hard, because when the oxygen gets low, you just, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't, I guess you could carry oxygen, but I've never done that before. But you have to push through, a limit that just feels very bad and difficult. And so getting yourself to be able to do that and not turn around, that's something that you have to really focus on, to say, no, I can do this. I will do this, and I will keep moving forward. And then knowing when you should stop saying that, when you've gotten to the point where, no, I'm in a dangerous situation now, or I've past my physical limits. And if I keep going, I'm in danger of not being able to finish this in the way that I need to. And again, even if you're with other people, you can't really rely on other people to carry you out. They might be able to help you a little bit, but you really have to play the game out as though you have to power yourself up and you have to power yourself down. And you can't really rely on other people because you start to endanger other people when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned it a second ago. Do you have a kind of a go-to mantra, simple or not simple, that you pull out when it seems like that wall has been hit?
Yeah, I almost always have a little song going through my head, and it's a different song. It's whatever. It may be something that I played with my band recently or whatever, but just like a little riff or something. But the way I do it is to try to not look up or think about the summit, but to find some point that's just 10 yards ahead, just another few steps, that rock over there or that bend in the trail, I can get to that, can't I? Yeah, I can do that, and get yourself to that place. And then take a break, take 10 seconds and take a few breaths and pick your next spot and then go to that spot. And it's actually remarkable because when I did this last summer with one of my sons and his girlfriend. We went up, climbed a 14er, and is one of those trails where from a relatively low altitude, let's say 12,000 feet, you can see all the way to the summit at 14. And it looks like a really long way. But if you just break it into little pieces, it's remarkable how quickly you end up getting there. And what looked like an insurmountable distance and steepness just turns into, a bunch of little sections that you traverse, and then you find yourself on the summit. So
yeah, I just released an episode last week with it was actually a group interview that I did. I've never done that before, but a group of ultra runners up in the mountains of North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they said something almost word for word what you just said. I mean, these guys are running 50 and 100-mile races like, they breathe. Yep. And every single one of them said there gets to a point where, and it happens every single time, where you're literally saying out loud, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is ludicrous. And they either have a go-to mantra that like is repetitive and it's like the thinking brain overriding the feeling brain.
Right.
Or they find, okay, I can see that pine tree. I can get to that pine tree.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm at the pine tree. I can get to the bend. And you put enough of those together and you got a 100-mile race.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is the thing is it's like both your mind and your body are programmed to tell you to stop before you really
survival
need to
function.
stop. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people are calibrated differently in those departments, but it's once you push past that you really, that's where the rewards are. That's where you discover things and where adventure really lives, right? It's out there beyond that comfort zone.
Yeah. And I think what I have learned through my, few adventures, but also talking to these different folks, including what you were saying earlier, is there's an element where you don't just one day go climb Kilimanjaro after sitting on the couch, right? You have to expand your window of tolerance to what you're willing and able and capable to do. And then one day you do this amazing thing that seemed impossible at some point in the past.
Yeah, no, exactly. I have a hike coming up in May, I guess about a month from now, where all three of my kids, my wife's going to come too, but she's going to kind of man the station down at the bottom of the mountain. But we're going to climb a mountain out in California called Mount San Jacinto. And the name of the hike is Cactus to Clouds. And you start on the desert floor and you climb up Mount San Jacinto, and it's over 10,000 feet of vertical, climb. So that's something I've never done before. And, my three kids are going to do it with me. And so really looking forward to that. But that's another one where I've never done that before. And I've watched YouTubes of it and have some friends that have done it, and everybody says, "Oh boy, this is going to be, one of the hardest things you've ever done." But I wish I was going there tomorrow. I really want to do it, and it's that same thing as you find something that I believe is within my capabilities, but I'm not really sure. And I want to go try it and see. And of course, when you do it with your kids, there's another element to it, right?
Oh,
There's,
yeah.
making sure that all four of us, make it up the mountain together. So yeah, so you start to look for those challenges after a while. It's like the reward system is such that you look for the next opportunity to, push the limits.
Do you find yourself pushing or looking for ways to push your limits in other areas of your life, whether it be emotionally or spiritually or something other than the physical pursuit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so both the other two things that occupy a lot of, my bandwidth in life are in business, and that's certainly one place where I think I've been involved in lots of things that we call them innovative, and I think that's another word in the business world for doing something that nobody else has done before, or that you haven't done before anyway. Yeah. And then in playing, guitar, it's the same thing. I'm still trying to get better and better, at playing. And every so often you'll experience a breakthrough and you'll say, wow, here I am at, my ripe old age, and I thought I'd plateaued and I would never get better. And all of a sudden I'm a better guitar player than I was. And that feeling is rewarding too. It's just like, it's this continual process of trying to push through and do things better and discover what's possible that I think drives all of those things.
It seems like one would feed the other too, right? I mean, the strength and weight that you gain on the trail gives you the confidence in a boardroom to try something that may be outside the box, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And at this, I think it took some years to get here, but I'm old enough now to be very clear about that. I'm very, intentional and conscious. I think in my earlier years, I was probably more intuitive about that. I wasn't really thinking, oh, this thing I'm doing on the mountain is going to help me in business. But now I'm very clear about it. I think that all of these things build on each other, and that pushing yourself and imagining possibilities that are beyond your current status quo, and trying to go do those things is, it becomes kind of a way of life.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Kenton Cool, who's a mountain guide, and mostly in Europe, but I'm going to release that in a week or so. But he's climbed Everest something like 17 times. He's got the non-Sherpa record, and just unreal feats. And I asked him this question about not just the why, but when he got to that point on the mountain where the summit was within reach and he had pushed through all of the limits to get to that point that said stop, stop, stop.
Yeah. What
was discovered? And for him, it was the sunrise coming up over the highest point in the world, and that translated into there's hope for today, right? And so he would have never gotten that lesson that now has become a baseline for his entire life if he hadn't pushed through to the highest peak in the world. And we don't all have to go to the top of Mount Everest,
right?
But what do you discover? What have you learned that you never would have gotten if you hadn't pushed through some of the hardest moments of your life?
Yeah, it's just the joy of living, right? It's like recognizing that you are, you're not sitting on your couch watching television. You have an appreciation for life that you can't get if you don't push past those limits. It's like I see things, I feel things that are so intense and so unattainable in any other way that you want to go back and do those, to really feel alive and just, you've used all your capabilities. You've used your mental capacity, you've used your mental bandwidth, you've used your physical capabilities, you've traversed maybe trails. I remember climbing Mount Shasta, Steve Sandusky and I, tried the first time. And I think in his podcast with you, he told you about how he broke his ankle. Yeah. And so I got up on the mountain, but the weather turned dreadful and we weren't able to summit. So it was, being up there and struggling through the weather and trying to find a path up and not being able to, and the guide who was actually with us at the time, making the call that we had to turn around, and just I remember the disappointment of that, and the feeling of not having achieved the goal. And so both Steve and I went back the next year and climbed it together. And
the redemption tour.
Yeah, it was a redemption tour. It's like, okay, I set my sights on something and I got high enough on the mountain. Steve was unfortunate, he was in the hospital, but I got high enough on the mountain to feel that I could do it, but was unable to. So for a year it ate at me.
Yeah.
I got back down to the bottom of the mountain, and I'm not normally an angry person. I'm not, I don't experience anger very often, but I was really, I felt pretty angry that I hadn't been able to get up there. Yeah. It was like something was denied, and, that sense of achievement and sort of having realized the goal, was missing. So went back and did it again the next year. Yeah. I don't know. It's an experience that if you never have it, I could try to describe it, for an hour and it would never penetrate. But once you do it, you experience that sort of life flow, just is realized when you get up to the top of it.
Yeah, I think something you just said popped this thought in my head though. And most, I'm gonna make a huge generalization here, and I've fit into this category for the longest time, that most American men don't experience, or they can't verbalize, but only a couple emotions, right? Happy, sad, mad.
Yep.
And you just went through a litany of them, all because of what you did on a mountain.
Yeah.
Right. You get all of it. And I think maybe that plays into what you were just talking about.
Exactly.
Experiencing the joy of being alive. I'm not dead. I'm alive. And what comes with that is all of this stuff.
Yep.
Good, bad, and ugly.
Down in your gut, in your heart, all of this is now out in the open. And that doesn't happen that often in day-to-day life. We're creatures of routine, and we sometimes are, a little zombie-like in our lives, and we go through the motions, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's kind of how you get through life, I guess. But there are these times when if you step out of that and try to push past that and set some goal which may be unachievable, then all of a sudden everything inside of you that's been kind of dormant explodes into life. And you feel it. Yeah. And that's just a joyous experience.
Yeah, that's you could say it's what we were made for, is to feel the full experience of living.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Much of the industrialized world that you and I live in, at least, is very monotonous, very one-dimensional, and can kind of be soul-sucking if you let it.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really cool insight that, now that you're saying it, I have heard over and over again in these conversations.
Yeah.
That I think maybe another way to say it is adventure is a really good drug, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as human beings, we don't do anything without it being a reward. At least we don't do things for very long unless there's a legit reward.
Right.
And what you just described is maybe one of the highest levels of rewarding that we could get. And
so
it makes sense to me that you're still pursuing it.
Yeah.
And do you find yourself kind of evangelizing people towards these types of things?
Yeah, I do, but with some reservation, right? Because you don't want to. I've seen too many people who, especially on mountains around here in Colorado, who, they're climbing a 14er in sandals, and they're obviously they don't know what they're getting into. They're not prepared. they may be carrying a water bottle in their hand, but they have no, there's no backpack with any, anything. There's no food. There's no rain gear. There's nothing. And those people, it's dangerous to go do that. And so, but having said that, yeah, if somebody's even remotely interested or curious about it, yeah, I'll take them on a hike myself and help them have that first experience. And usually when they do, they don't need me to get them to do it a second time. They'll go back and do it. Yeah.
That's cool. What the top 2 or 3 adventures that you've done? What would be in that category?
Yeah. I think, well, certainly Kilimanjaro was one, just because the height of it and the experience of traveling up the mountain with it's a parade. You've got, they don't call them Sherpas on Kilimanjaro, they call them porters, but there's the whole band of people going up together. That was a wonderful experience. There's a hike here in Colorado, which I've done twice now, called the Four Pass Loop. And the Four Pass
Maroon
Loop.
Bells?
Yeah. Yep. It starts at Maroon Bells Lake, and if you do the whole thing, it takes you over 4 mountain passes. Each one of them is 12,000 feet at least, and you go up a pass, drop down into a valley, hike across, go up another pass, hike. It was about a 28-mile hike. I've done it now. It's a loop, so you end up back at Maroon Bells Lake at the end of it. I've done it clockwise and counterclockwise now. And the first time I did it was with a friend of mine named Skip Schweiss, he's I think pretty well known in the financial services world.
Yep.
He's been kind of a mentor and teacher and guide to me over the years in all of the mountain climbing adventures that I've had. And he and I did it together the first time, and that was an eye-opening experience. We started out very early in the morning, and we only saw, I think, 2 people on the entire trip. We did it pretty late in the season, and it turned out there was snow in some of the passes, which created some difficulties and so forth. But we were out there literally by ourselves. We saw those 2 people at the very beginning of the trip. One of them told us we couldn't get through the first pass; the snow was too deep. But we found a way, and I think we got back long after we thought we were going to get back. It was dark, and it took us a lot longer. I think it was maybe a 13-hour trip or something by the time we got done.
Well, that's still pretty impressive to do those 4 passes in 13 hours. Is that your fastest, or do you have a faster time?
I think it was about the same both times. Yeah, it was about the same both times. Yeah, and the second time I did it was, I had 2 of my kids with me. And Skip was also on that trip. That was a much bigger trip. Lots of people. Eric Clark, who I think you've interviewed.
Oh, I've heard about this trip.
Yeah. And so there were quite a number of financial services people on that trip. And 2 of my kids. And that was, again, another just an amazing experience. So that was good. The glacier climbs, Mount Rainier and Shasta and Mount Hood and Baker and other mountains that I've climbed, when you're roped in and you've got ice axes and crampons on, those all are just very exhilarating experiences, just because you're staring down, on Mount Rainier, you're looking down into crevasses that go down 200 feet, and you have to walk across a little ice bridge that goes across that thing. You're not sure if it's going to hold, and those are just really mind-blowing kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
And you're roped in, and so you're very close with your team. You're very dependent on the people that you're with, which creates a bond that's really indescribable.
What has been your experience or your take on the people connection of doing these adventures? Do you find yourself gravitating more towards solo things or more towards group activities?
Yeah. So I like both. I love, my training hikes as I'm getting ready for this Cactus to Clouds hike, I've done all of those by myself, and I love doing that because I can push myself and just let my mind wander, and there's no obligation to, pace myself with other people or talk. I'm not really a big talker on the trail. I like to just let my mind go, but a lot of people are, big talkers, and so you have to kind of go along with that. But
be careful.
Yeah, but I love the bonds created on these hikes. I mean, there's a group. It's the same group that we did that 4 pass loop with, and Mount Shasta for that matter. It's a group of financial services people. We go every year and do some big hike somewhere. And I think this year will be the 13th one of those hikes. And that group, those people that have been doing that with me for all those years, those are like brothers now. If they showed up on the doorstep and needed a home, they'd have a bed and a meal. Yeah, I mean these are people I don't necessarily see that much, off the trail. I mean, occasionally I do run across them, but the intensity of the bond that's built through this experience is really indescribable. And Skip, who I've now climbed, I don't know, innumerable mountains with and taken, many hikes with, he's like, he's like part of my family. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
What's the next one that group's doing?
So we have a trip planned in Telluride this year, and it's not a single trail. It's the two people that put the trip together. Skip is one of them, and then Chip Rome from Tiburon Advisors is the other. They've combined a number of trails. This one's going to be really tough. I think Skip and Chip went and tried to do a dry run, and I don't think they did the whole thing. It was pretty tough. And they usually go and do a dry run, and they complete that without any difficulty. So I think they have warned everybody this will be difficult. And there are shorter versions of the hike that you can do. But we're making it even worse on ourselves, I think, because we're climbing Mount Sneffels, which is a 14er, which is out there like a few days before we actually go and do the big hike. So we'll climb a 14er and then take a couple of days off and then go do this. I think it's like a 23 or 24 mile hike, but it mostly takes place between 9,000 and 13,000 feet. So it's at altitude most of the time. So that'll make it, I think, very challenging.
Yes, I've been out there. Sneffels is a foreboding peak over Telluride.
Yeah.
That'll be cool to do that.
I've got a big picture of it over my bed in my bedroom, and my wife and I, love to look at it, but neither one of us has ever climbed it, so it'll be good to find.
That's cool.
Check that box. Yeah.
There's also a really famous ultra marathon run out there, kind of in the Telluride, Durango, Silverton.
Yeah,
I believe it's called Hard Rock, but it's one of the more difficult because of the elevation, because of the terrain.
Yeah.
But the pictures that I've seen of people that have been out there, it's out of this world. I mean, some of the views and the valleys and the peaks are unreal.
Yeah, it's exquisite, really. It's just, one of the, my wife and I used to go pretty regularly to the Telluride Bluegrass Festival. And you just sit down there in Telluride and look up at all these incredible mountains. And so now we're going to go climb some of them.
That's really cool. I'd love to go back to that music festival. My very first guest on the podcast was a friend of mine from college named Brew Davis, and he's a musician as well. He mostly kind of folksy bluegrass music, and he was out in Telluride for that festival, I think several years, but in the last couple of years, and sent pictures of, the festival looks cool, but I mean, it's in that box canyon that is so unique. And again, foreboding, it just comes straight up out of the ground.
There's nothing like it. I mean, it's just, it's one of the more magnificent spots on the earth, I think.
Yeah. When is that?
The Bluegrass Festival?
No, the trip that you're going to be taking.
It's at the beginning of August. I think we actually climb August 7th, something like that. Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah. We'll be climbing on a Monday. Yeah.
The trip with your kids is in May.
Yep.
And that'll
be the beginning of May. So
where did you say that was?
That's down. You start in Palm Springs.
Palm Springs.
So,
okay.
So you stay in Palm Springs, and then the trailhead is right by the Palm Springs Art Museum. And
interesting.
So climb up from there, and that'll be quite the experience, because there's no relief on that one. It's just straight up. And the way that hike works is pretty interesting. You climb from the desert floor up to the top, and then you climb back down the mountain. I think it's maybe another 5 or 6 miles, and then there's a tram that you actually can take down for the rest of it. So it's maybe 22 miles total, but you don't have to walk all the way back down the 10,000 feet, which makes it a little easier.
That makes a big difference, and the down many times is just as difficult.
Yeah, exactly. It's just pounds your knees. And I know my wife and I climbed Ben Nevis in Scotland last year, and that's the highest mountain in the UK. And it was much harder going down than it was going up. I mean, it was
Yeah.
tough, tough on the way up, but yeah, it was very difficult on the way down.
What did you think about hiking around that part? That's
That
in the
was
Highlands, correct?
Yeah, it's in the Highlands. It's
Yeah.
just outside of Fort William. It's beautiful, but it's very different than here. It's much fewer trees, more open space, more stony and kind of rolling mountains instead of the sort of sharp, craggy peaks that we have here. But the weather is what I think sometimes makes that mountain so challenging. We were very fortunate and got pretty good weather while we were climbing it, but you start down in pretty decent warm weather and you climb up, and the people who climbed it the day before we did went through fog, they went through rain, they went through snow. It's
All
just,
seasons.
yeah, it's just this big mountain that sort of sits out there by itself and creates its own weather pattern. So, but we were fortunate. We did have to hike through snow at the top because there's snow on the top of it. And there was some fog that sort of sat down just above our heads as we were, but we never had to hike through the nastiest part of it. So,
Did you ever, when you lived in DC, did you ever get over to Grayson Highlands State Park in Virginia?
I don't think so.
It kind of sits on the North Carolina Virginia border, and it has very much a Scottish Highlands feel. Very few trees, lots of rolling bald peaks, and the fog and the wind and the rain. The times that I've been there, I've experienced all that. It's really fascinating. And Grayson Highlands also has roaming wild ponies all through there.
Wow,
So
that's very
you
cool.
backpack through, and these tiny little wild ponies will come right up to you.
That's neat.
It's a cool experience. But
feature, yeah.
So I got a couple other questions and we'll wrap it up. But what in the next 10 years, what are some big outdoor goals, adventure goals that you have for yourself?
Yeah. So the next really big one that I'd like to do, and I'm hoping to be able to do this next year, is Mount Blanc in France. And I think that's the highest peak in the Alps. It's 15,000 something feet. And there's guides that will take you up that. There's a lot of training and acclimatization that you have to do. They climb a few peaks in Italy before you try to go up Mount Blanc. That's one. My wife and I are doing one in September, which is not a climb at all, but it's a long hike. We're going on the Camino del Santiago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're starting in Portugal, in Porto, Portugal, and then hiking. I think it's 160, 170 miles up to Santiago, and doing that over 2.5 weeks, something like that.
That is a pilgrimage. That's really cool.
Yeah, so that one's first on the list, and then maybe Mount Blanc next year.
Now, Mont Blanc is near Chamonix, is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah, exactly.
So Kenton, who I referred to earlier, lived in Chamonix and climbed Mont Blanc many, many times. I think he still takes groups down there, even though much of his work now is in the Himalayas. But the way he described that area was just like out of a storybook. So that'll be cool.
The pictures I've seen are just magnificent, and I'm really looking forward to challenging myself on that one.
Very cool. Well, let's end on this. And I do like to ask this question from time to time.
Sure.
That adventure looks different and means something different for everyone. So in your own words, what does adventure mean to you? Yeah,
adventure for me is it's really about self-discovery and just feeling alive. And those are two different things, really. The one, self-discovery is I think for me it's just very important, whether it's climbing mountains or playing music or even in business, is just like what can you do? How far can you, what's your purpose? Why are you here? It's like, what were you meant to do? And if you never ask yourself that question, you could literally go through life and, just be sort of sleepwalking, I think. But I've always tried to just imagine what the possibilities are, what you might be able to do, and just find out if you can actually do those things. And sometimes the path you set yourself on doesn't lead to the destination you thought you were heading towards. But that's kind of the fun of it, is you never know where you're going to end up or what you're going to learn. And then the just the feeling alive part of it is just the pure joy of it. it's the reward you get, whether you're successful or not successful. It's just really having the experience of being alive and saying, yes, this is I've found the depths of my, emotional capacity or my physical capacity or whatever it is. I'm now, I'm in a joyful state, and that just feels great.
Yeah. What do you think? I said that was the last question. I do have one more that came up.
Sure.
I mean, for all of us, as we get older, and you alluded to this before, there will be different physical limitations.
Yeah.
And will that be a sad day for you, or is it just something else to come and look at differently?
I think it will be. I think it will be. So I've been really lucky. So I'm 72 years old. I'll be 73 when I try to climb up Mount San Jacinto, right? And so I'm way past my expiration date. I shouldn't be able to do this stuff anymore. That is kind of how I look at it. So each one of these hikes is like a bonus for me, is a luxury. And so I keep being amazed when I get up to the top of a mountain, or I did a training hike last week, and I blew up and down this mountain. And I think, how am I doing that? I shouldn't be able to do this, but it's just this kind of delight that I take in it, and I appreciate the fact that is going to end at some point. That I've been blessed with the physical capabilities to do it and the mental desire to do it, but at some point that's going to end. And I think this is the benefit of having actually gone out and done all of these things, is I'm going to be okay with that. I will feel like I tried to do as many things as I could do, and I fit in a lot of things, and I accomplished a lot of things, and I'll be sad that I can't go out and do more, but I'll feel good that I tried, as much as I did. And I'm at a point right now where I'm adding to a story that I already feel is, a pretty good story, and I'm happy with what I've accomplished, and now just it's kind of gravy. Anything else I can put together.
That is a beautiful summary. And I think maybe part of your secret sauce is the fact that you have continued to move. You've continued to push and challenge and accomplish these different things. And I think probably that allows you to keep doing so at 72, 73 years old.
No, I think so. I'm afraid to stop moving. If I stop moving, I mean, just sink. Who knows? But
this has been very cool. I want to be Scott when I grow up. How about that? I think that's you got all the stuff that I'm moving towards. And,
I consider that a high compliment, Josh. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this has been a blast, and I think you have very, very artfully and gracefully painted the picture that I really. It's why I have these conversations. That's I'm a financial advisor, and this has nothing to do with financial planning, but it does have to do with living life right now and living it to the fullest. And you're doing it. You are absolutely doing it.
I'm giving it my best shot.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thanks for your time, and I hope we get to do this again.
Thank you, Josh.
And you have a whole other list of things that you've accomplished by that point that we can talk about those.
Yeah, we'll see what else, what other great adventures have popped up along the way.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thanks for listening. And I sincerely mean that, because I'm extremely grateful that you choose to spend this time with me. I don't take it for granted, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, be sure to check out material on my website at ridgelinewealthadvisors.com. That's advisors with an ORS. And sign up for my monthly newsletter, The Money Trail Guide, which you can find on the blog page. Until next time, I hope you pursue your own great adventure.